All right. Hi, everybody. Now that you're all fed, I hope you'll enjoy this. And I think it's not going to be a heavy hitting like you had this morning. No tariff talk here. I titled my presentation "Beyond the Scroll: Reclaiming Intuition in the Age of Infinite Inspiration." I want to thank Michael and the DLN for having me. I'm genuinely honored to be here. I feel a little strange being up here. I like to, I don't really talk about what I do, I just do it. But here we are. I am Colin King. I style spaces, I arrange objects, I design things, I direct shoots, I obsess over shadows, and occasionally I have an existential crisis whether a single bowl is too much or not enough. My title changes depending on the day or the client. Sometimes I'm a stylist, sometimes I'm a designer, sometimes I get introduced as creative director, which sounds really nice, but often just means I'm the one deciding how the curtain falls. And to be honest, I'm still figuring out what it all means. It's gonna be a lot trying to do both at once, so bear with me. The common thread, the thing that has stayed constant, is a desire to create spaces and images that feel lived in, human, and quietly magnetic. Not perfect, not polished, but full of intention. Because intention drives results, whether it's a product launch, a catalog campaign, or a retail rebrand. When a space or an image feels intentional, it performs, connecting emotionally and commercially. Lately, though, I don't know if you guys have been feeling this, but I've been feeling a shift. We're surrounded by beauty. It's never been easier to find. It's on our phones, in our inboxes, on our Pinterest boards, full of travertine and low-slung furniture. Yet I find myself wondering, with so much inspiration at our fingertips, have we actually stopped feeling inspired? That's what I want to talk about today, what it means to be creative in a world that constantly is showing you what creativity is supposed to look like, how styling, designing, and creative direction are starting to blur. And that's both freeing and disorienting. And most of all, how we can start to tune back in to our eyes, our instincts, and the quiet voice that knows when something just feels right. So I'm going to talk about inspiration, the evolution of inspiration there versus now. Like, for me, I may look a lot younger than I am, but we can look back a bit. There was a time when finding inspiration felt like a real activity, like a real adventure. You'd spend the afternoon flipping through old design books, slowly tearing pages from a magazine, and if you were like me, like carefully with a metal ruler, like you were doing surgery, and you'd walk through a flea market and spot something, a brass object, a lumpy ceramic, and your brain would light up. Or sometimes you would travel and you'd come back with a single perfect detail etched in your mind, the way the linen curtains in a Greek rental flow or the color of a stone floor in a Milanese apartment. And inspiration really took time. It arrived on its own schedule, and maybe because of that, it felt a lot more sacred. Now, inspiration, it finds us. So it shows up uninvited, it floods our screens at all hours, and I don't know about you, but before I brush my teeth, I've already seen like 7 perfectly styled vignettes. I see like 3 trending color palettes, and this like new Scandinavian brand that I have to know about. And don't get me wrong, some of it is really gorgeous. The things I save, the screenshot, I'm not above a mood board. But when does inspiration cross the line into imitation? And when do all of these saved images just cancel each other out? Because here's the thing, the more we scroll, the harder it becomes to tell when someone else's eyes ends and ours begins. The algorithm gets smarter, and our instincts, if we're not careful, get a lot quieter. It's not that the images aren't inspiring, it's that they come so fast and in such quantity that we don't have the time to metabolize them, to feel them. We collect aesthetics like we collect recipes. They aren't rooted in anything. So the question becomes, how do we make space again? How do we slow the scroll? And how do we actually see? this is a mood board I'm working on with Roman and Williams. So this is how I kind of see, there's a photographer, Sheila Metzger, who's like, she was working prolifically in the 90s, but not so much anymore. And I want to talk about blurred boundaries now, the new fluency. I think styling, designing, and directing are all blending together. So question, have you ever walked into a room and just known something was off? Like a chair was trying too hard or the vase wanted to be somewhere else entirely. For me, that feeling, that tug to like move, shift, nudge, adjust, that's never been something that's learned. It's just been something that's been there for me. I never assisted a stylist. I didn't go to design school. I wasn't handed a roadmap, and my career wasn't built on credentials. It was built on an instinct. I moved to New York as a dancer and a hunger to create. My first break came not in product, but it came in editorial. I started styling my first stories and producing for T Magazine and then Architectural Digest, places where a single frame had to carry an entire atmosphere. There was no product to sell, only a good story to tell. That experience shaped everything, the pace, the restraint, the reverence for a good shadow. Later, that same discipline came into my commercial work. I found something interesting. When brands embraced editorial intention, their images didn't just look better, they performed better. So let's talk about roles, because if you've ever tried to explain what a stylist is to someone outside of the industry, you know how quickly the conversation turns into like an interpretive dance. So you put things on tables. I mean, yeah, kind of. But I also tell stories. I shape atmosphere. I edit. I zhuzh. And that's an official term, zhuzh. Does anyone know how to spell it? It was like, it's so funny. Like, yeah, exactly. There's like a whole New York Times article about how to spell zhuzh. And for a long time, I think styling was seen as decoration. You know, the garnish, a pillow fluff, like a branch trim, a well-placed lemon. But to me, styling is so much more than that. It's punctuation. Sometimes it's the period at the end of a sentence, and sometimes it's the whole paragraph. It's the thing that makes a space feel intentional, not staged, and alive, not static. And yet, styling doesn't exist in a vacuum anymore. For me, and probably not for many of you, I've been hired to style, shoot, and ended up like rearranging the entire floor plan. I've rewritten brand messaging, and I've diplomatically suggested that maybe we don't need that huge fiddle leaf fig in the corner. So I asked myself, like, what was I doing? Was I designing, styling, directing? And I think it's yes, all of the above. And sometimes also playing therapist, mediator, and motivational speaker to like a really frazzled creative team. And the roles bleed together. The titles, they do blur. And honestly, that used to scare me and freak me out because there was a time I wanted a clear job description. I wanted a lane, I wanted a label, a sense of where I started and where I stopped. But over time, I've learned that blur isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. We're not losing clarity, we're gaining fluency. We're building a new visual language. One speaks directly to how brands connect with customers. In my work for Benny Ruggs, Zara Home, Crate and Barrel, West Elm, and Aldo, that fluency has helped me turn quiet creative choices into bold brand moments. Whether I'm styling, designing, consulting, or art directing, it all comes from the same impulse to tell a story, to shape an experience, and to guide a feeling from concept to reality. Personally, I've had like a very complicated relationship with stylists because it's a title that's opened doors for me and one that I'm most often called. But sometimes it feels like quite a little box. And it feels like shorthand for something that describes something much smaller than the work I actually do. Because styling isn't a task, it's a lens. It's not what I am, but one of the most nuanced tools that shape emotion, story, and space. And I kind of figured this out as I was putting all this together for you guys. What I know now is styling is design. Design is direction. and direction is intuition. And when we let go of rigid definitions, we make room for something more meaningful. The work has expanded, and if we're willing to trust ourselves, so have we. This is some work I've done with Benny Rugg. So I started as a stylist. I styled their first campaign 6 years ago, and now I'm their artistic director and part owner of the company. I design rugs for them, direct all their campaigns and marketing. And here we go, the algorithmic eye of influence versus intuition. So this algorithm, our ever-present, aesthetically savvy overlord, it's trained to show us what works, what's trending, what everyone else is saving, but what it doesn't show us is what's true. It doesn't know how I feel or what you notice or what I keep returning to quietly in the back of my mind. The algorithm rewards speed, familiarity, repetition, which is why you start to see the same gestures, the same tones, the same surfaces again and again. Rooms become a genre, styling becomes a template, and even the imperfections feel quite optimized. I'm not immune to a scroll. I get swept up, and I notice that I start to put like the same vase in 3 different rooms, and I start to wonder, like, is this still my instinct, or is it just like muscle memory? To protect my intuition, I've learned to step away. I take long walks. It's like I sit in silence. I revisit the same like 5 objects on my shelf and see what they have to say that day. I sketch, I write, and I really let boredom in, because boredom is where intuition gets a little bit louder for me. Repetition, especially now, I feel like it kind of leans toward laziness or devotion, or like a devotion, but it's how I figure out what holds weight, what continues to resonate, and even after the trend has passed. I don't want my work to look like anyone else's. I want it to seem familiar, but still like it's something you've never seen before. And to do that, I have to keep my eye not just trained, but tender, a little skeptical, curious, and always willing to pause before placing. Sorry about the lag here. It's too hard to speak and move these things at the same time. That brings me to this idea of stillness as a strategy. Stillness gets a bad rap in our culture. It's often mistaken for indecision, for not doing enough, especially in the age of social media, where movement equals momentum and productivity is always performative. But in my world, stillness is a strategy, and a powerful one. In content-saturated markets, stillness isn't passive, it's a competitive edge, and it invites us to pause, and it holds attention. So during the pandemic, especially the quarantine days, I started a series called Stay Home Still Life. And I just set up my camera, and I'd film myself building a still life, no fancy edits or direction, just kind of me moving things around until they felt just right. It wasn't about teaching anyone anything or performing, it was about trust. It was about trusting my eye to know what to do, trusting the objects to speak to me when they were ready, and trusting that something quiet could still hold attention. That series built the foundation of my career, not because it was polished, but because it was honest. And that honesty, that slow, watchful attention, is still at the heart of how I work. Styling, at least as what I've come to know, isn't about doing more. It's about knowing when to stop, knowing when to pause, and when the room has said what it needs to say. And we'll just breeze through these. So looking forward, a new role for the stylist. So where does that leave us? What is a stylist now? For me, I think we're not just translators anymore. We're brands, storytellers, documentarians, and interpreters of atmosphere in a commercial world. Because most people will never step foot into the rooms we style, or I style, they won't feel the air, or they won't smell the flowers, or hear the floor creak. They'll experience it once through an image. And that image has to hold an entire mood. It has to speak on behalf of everything the space can't say out loud. So my job becomes translating that space into feeling, object into atmosphere, and reality into memory. We make intangible visible. And I don't mean that in a lofty, like art school kind of way. Clients aren't hiring stylists anymore to make it pretty. They're hiring us to bring perspective, to notice what's there, what's missing, to decide what matters and what doesn't, and to turn emotional instinct into strategic visual identity. The briefs also, like I've noticed over working with brands, like the briefs over the past few years have gotten like much looser. The roles are like more fluid, and I'm becoming like 5 people on a call sheet. And while I was mentioning that it like used to be very daunting, it's now becomes my favorite part, because the best projects, the ones that like hum with something real, are usually the ones where the creative trust is wide open, where I'm invited to show up not just as a set of hands, but as a whole I and a whole self. One of my mentors, Robin Staniford, she once told me that the mood board is light because I want to create something that doesn't exist. And for me, that line like cracked me open. I stopped trying to match reference and started trying to match like feeling and composition and mood behind it. And I began pulling inspiration from a lot stranger places. So, foreign films, a puddle of light on the subway wall, old paintings, Dutch masters, and not to copy, but to respond. To build something with like a pulse. Because I feel like everyone in this room knows what we make takes time, and it takes hours of looking, sifting, second guessing. It takes presence, energy, and patience. And then poof, it's like out in the world, consumed in seconds, saved and liked, and then forgotten by lunch. So we have to ask ourselves the question, and we have to keep asking ourselves this question: are we making work for the feed, or are we making it for the feeling? Because the algorithm, it's always just going to want more, but the good work, it really wants meaning. And meaning in business is the difference between noise and resonance. I wanted to add in like a personal anecdote because it actually just happened last week. I was at a cocktail party in Belgium, one of those like really creative, those like industry things. The ones like low lighting, like too much linen, and like someone like holding a coupe glass a little too tenderly. But I was chatting with like this older, very established architect, and we were making small talk, trading like notes on projects and places and things. And when I told him I was a stylist and a designer, he like smiled and he casually asked like, "Well, don't you want more for yourself?" And the thing is, it wasn't like mean. It wasn't even pointed. It was pretty gentle. It was like a passing comment that like, I don't know. It just felt like a ripple. But I couldn't really let it go because, for years I've been asking myself the same question. Was styling enough? Was I enough? Should I be chasing something bigger, louder, shinier, like more square footage, more credentials, something that sounded a little bit more impressive on a panel introduction? And for a while I thought more meant like leveling up, like I was stuck in the foyer of my own potential, like waiting to be invited deeper into the house. But with time, and to be honest, some therapy and self-reflection, I've come to a different definition. More isn't about scale, it's about depth. It's not about building a career that fills a room. It's about building a life that fits. The real joy for me doesn't come from a campaign launch or a beautiful, perfect spread in a magazine. I'm very grateful for those, but it comes from the quietest parts of my process. Placing a single branch in a vase and watching how it tilts, walking through a room and noticing the exact moment light hits the edge of a table, rearranging the same handful of objects on my table for the third time, not because I want to, but because something in me needs to. This work has given me something bigger than recognition. It's given me a rhythm. It's taught me how to notice, how to pause, how to listen. And I've realized I don't want more stuff. I want stillness, more clarity, more meaning. So now when someone asks me, don't you want more? I say, yeah, but not louder, not bigger, just deeper. And I think depth drives loyalty, and loyalty builds brands. And to me, that is more than enough. I'm gonna leave you with this. So, we've trained ourselves to collect images, to save, to pin, to scroll, but have we trained ourselves to see? True inspiration isn't something we download, it's something we recognize. It comes when we're paying attention, not just to the world, but to ourselves. So here's the question I try to ask myself, and I offer it to you. When you place an object, when you arrange a room, when you step back and take it all in, are you arranging with intention, or are you arranging to be noticed? There's no shame in wanting to be seen. I think for me, a great gauge of when I know if a picture has been captured or I want to is when I want to share it with the world. You know, like if I don't want to share it, then obviously, yeah, I don't like it. And I'm very grateful to be in a position where people want to see what I'm doing and want to look. You know, I think the most meaningful work I've made, the work that always stays with me, has come from a much quieter place, a place like beyond the scroll, a place where I can show up to work, where preparation meets improvisation. You know, I think if I over-prepare for anything, I miss all of the moments of serendipity and when things actually can come together. I think working with a lot of designers and brands, when things are too mapped out or they're too procured, it doesn't leave any room for chance. It doesn't leave any room for story. A place beyond the scroll, beyond the feed, and beyond the need to prove. For me, it comes from intuition, it comes from stillness, and it comes from the joy of making something just because it feels right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Colin.